Welcome to this Yoga for Grief practice. For this practice, you're going to need 2 blocks and a blanket. Let's get started in child's pose. And this is going to be a supported child's pose. So we're going to bring 1 block underneath the head, and if you'd like to bring a block underneath the seat, you can do that also. So you're going to come onto the shins, spread the knees, and drop the seat back towards the heels. And then bring the head down onto a block. And these blocks have 3 levels. So you can bring it up on level 1 as high as it goes, mid-size level 2, or all the way down to level 3. You can also stack the blocks if that feels better. And we're going to rest the forehead on the block. Walk the fingers out in front of you. And come up high on the fingertips to start out, keeping the shoulders active. And then begin to notice the breath. Allow the breath to guide in through the nose and glide out through the nose. Take a few moments as you start the transition coming out of the mind and into the body. This Yoga for Grief practice was inspired by the unexpected passing away of my best friend. Michelle Obama said, "It hurts to live when someone has died." And grief can be about more than the death of a loved one. Grief is about the loss of something that we loved. It could be the loss of a friendship, a relationship, a job, our health. Grief is about loss. And as we're grieving, the natural thing to do is to fold in and turn inside. So this practice is going to be full of forward folds. The body's natural response to trauma is to fold in and protect our vital organs, to close off the heart and give it a safe space to put itself back together, healing after being shattered. And take a moment here, notice how you're feeling and what you need. If the body is opening a little further, the blocks that you're using for support may begin to feel a little bit more like a burden than a means of support. So feel free to move the block out of the way if that feels like the right thing to do. And maybe relax the palms all the way down to the mat. Resting the heart as close to the mat as possible. We'll take a few more breaths here. And feel free to maybe rock the hips back and forth. Bring some gentle movement into the body. Can roll the wrists if that feels good. Just give yourself whatever you need right here. And on the next inhale, we're slowly going to start to slide the hands in towards the body as we roll our way up. And we're going to come into Sukhasana, easy pose. So you can cross the ankles, roll back onto the sit bones, and bring one or both blocks out in front of you on whatever level makes sense for you. And start to walk the hands out and rest the head on the block or blocks if they're stacked. And we're going to come up on the fingertips here and just allow yourself to be supported. Trauma causes the body to contract. So in this practice, we're going to be holding some of our poses for a little bit longer to give ourselves that opportunity to start reopening. And while trauma is a psychological process, there is this complicated and beautiful connection between the mind and the body. So as we psychologically experience the trauma of grief, the body really holds on to those emotions. The body stores all of those challenging and deep emotions. The pain, the loss, even the fear of moving forward. And our yoga practice gives us a safe space to process these emotions and start to work some of those difficult and challenging emotions and tension out of the mind and the body. And as you're ready, you can reverse the cross of the legs. Come back into your fold. Make any adjustments that you need to make with your blocks. Stay present with your breath. Tuned into yourself. Notice any place in the body where you're holding tension, and imagine that you could breathe into that spot. And on the next inhale, we're slowly going to begin to slide the hands in and roll our way up. Set the block to the side for a moment, and we're going to rock forward into tabletop. So we'll come on hands and knees. Bring the wrist right underneath the shoulders, and the hips come right over the knees. And we'll just take a few cat-cows here. So on the inhale, drop the belly, arch the back, turn the gaze up. And on an exhale, press into the palms as you begin to round the spine, round the shoulders, tuck the chin into the chest. Keep moving with the breath, inhaling to come into your arch. Exhaling to round and curl in. Move at your own pace with your own breath here. And after the next exhale, we'll all meet in tabletop. Take a big inhale, and as you exhale, turn to gaze out over the left shoulder. Imagine that you could pull the left shoulder and the left hip in towards one another, lengthening on the right. Inhale, come back to center. And exhale, turn the gaze out over the right shoulder, moving the right hip and right shoulder in together to lengthen on the left side. Inhale brings you back to center. And we're going to bring the knees a little bit wider apart to give ourselves some space. Maybe walk the hands forward slightly. And then we're going to come into some hip circles. So as you inhale, bring the hips forward towards the wrists. And then on the exhale, start to circle the hips to the side. Shift them back towards the heels. Over to the other side. And inhale back to center. And keep moving with these. Know that these hip circles can be as big or as small as it feels good for you. Everyone's hips are made a little bit differently. Always inhale to come forward and exhale to reach back. And you may notice a little bit of that cat-cow sensation happening. We arch slightly as we come forward and round a little bit as we move to the back. And when you're ready, you can reverse the direction of the hip circles. Don't worry about how they look. Maybe close the eyes if that feels good. And just imagine that you're releasing some of that tension that's stored in the hips. Our hips carry a lot of our tension and stress from relationships. They carry a lot of complicated emotions. And then eventually we all meet back at center. Come back into tabletop. Bringing the hands right underneath the shoulders. And we're going to step the right foot forward into a low lunge. Option to use your blocks here if that feels good. And just shift the hips forward. Find a little mini opening in the chest. Breathe into the left hip flexor. And as you're ready on an exhale, begin to send the hips back, straighten the right leg, bow forward over that right leg just slightly. Inhale, glide back into your low lunge. Exhale, shift the hips back, straighten the right leg. And take just a couple more of these, moving at your own pace, with your own breath. Pause anywhere that feels good. And then we'll come back into tabletop and we'll get that on the other side. So we're going to step the left foot through into a low lunge. Shift the hips forward. Open the chest ever so slightly. Roll the shoulders back. Maybe the gaze is up. And try to breathe right into that right hip flexor. Find some space there. Notice what you might be holding on to. What repressed emotions live there. And when you're ready on an exhale, begin to straighten the left leg, shift the hips back, and bow right over that left leg. And then move into your flow. Move at your own pace. Move with your own breath. While we know that yoga can't give us back what we've lost, it can't fix the situation that's caused our grief, it does give us a safe and effective way to have an in-body experience. And research shows that healing from trauma can happen through in-body experiences. And then we'll come back into tabletop. And from here, we're going to ditch the blocks just for a moment. And we're going to come into puppy pose. So keep what you have with the hips high. And then come down onto the forearms, drop the chest. Maybe the forehead comes to the mat, maybe not. Walk the hands out. And we're here for just a brief moment. Just a little gentle back bend to counter some of those forward folds. And as you inhale, begin to slide the hands back to tabletop. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog just for a moment. Maybe walk your dog out if it feels good. And then slowly begin to walk the feet up towards the hands. And we're going to grab one block here, maybe two, depending on how tight your hamstrings are today. And we're going to come into Uttanasana, forward fold, with the support of the blocks. Feel free to put a little bend in the knees if that feels good. With every inhale, let the spine get a little longer. With every exhale, see if you can go a little deeper. You might want to grab on to the backs of the ankles. You might want to hold on to opposite elbows and just hang. Or you could bring the hands down to the ground for support. And feel free to wiggle around and shift. Whatever feels good for you. Feel the strength of the legs. And as you reconnect with the strength of the legs, imagine that you're reconnecting with your own inner strength. Tapping into that inner source of strength and resiliency to help you cope with the grief that you're processing. One more breath here. And on an inhale, lift the chest and bring the blocks into the hands. We're going to step the right foot between the blocks and step the left foot to the back of the mat. Parsvottanasana, pyramid pose. Inhale, find some length. And think about drawing the right hip back, sending the left hip forward, kind of squaring the pelvis. And then maybe fold over the front leg to your own degree. If you need to take the blocks down a notch, feel free. If you need to ditch the blocks, that's always an option. Just fold in on yourself, protecting your heart space. Give yourself that space to heal as you rely on the strength of the legs. Keep the spine long. One more breath here. And then we'll trade the legs. So right foot steps back, left foot steps forward. Inhale, find length, lift the heart, and then begin to square the pelvis. So we notice this tendency that the hips and the pelvis like to do funky things in pyramid pose. So we want to square the pelvis off. Right hip forward, left hip back, just slightly. And then fold, keeping the spine long. Option to close the eyes here if that feels good. Couple more breaths here. Inhale, lift the chest, gaze forward. Set the blocks to the side for a moment. Step back for downward facing dog. Take an inhale, lift the right leg, three-legged dog. Exhale, bend the right knee and sweep the right leg through. We're going to come into pigeon pose. So take an inhale, lift the chest. And as you exhale, begin to walk forward. You can bring a blanket under the hip if you need to. Bring the blocks under the hip or the head for support. Give yourself what you need here. Option to close the eyes if that feels good. And take a few breaths right here in pigeon. Really releasing any emotions that the hips are holding. Any tension in the body. And on the next inhale, slowly begin to lift the chest. Tuck the left toes. Swing the right leg back into down dog. And on an inhale, left leg lifts, three-legged dog. Exhale, bend the left knee and swing the bent left leg through, coming into pigeon on the left side. So take a moment to square the hips. Maybe the shin comes parallel to the front edge of the mat, maybe not. Always the option to bend the back right leg if that feels good in your body. Bring a block wherever you need it. And as you're ready, begin to bow forward. Keep the spine long. Option to close the eyes only if it feels good. Breathe right into your hip. Scan the body. Notice where you're holding tension. And send the breath right into that space. When the body's holding tension, it tells us something about the emotions that we're feeling and where those emotions are coming from. And on the next inhale, slowly start to lift the chest. Tuck the right toes and send the left leg back, downward facing dog. And then drop down on the knees. Crawl the knees towards the top of the mat. Cross the ankles, roll back onto the sit bones, and extend both legs out in front of you. We're going to come into Janusharasana. So you'll bend the right knee, bring the sole of the right foot into the inside of the left thigh. Take an inhale and find some length. And as you exhale, you're going to bow forward. But we're not going to think about bringing the nose to the knee. We don't have to touch the toes. We're just going to walk the hands out gently. And the key here is keep the spine long. If you want to bring blocks down on the sides of the leg, you can do that and rest the elbows. If you have the space to grab the foot, feel free, but know that it's not mandatory. Option to close the eyes if it feels good. And really turn in on yourself. With every inhale, see if you can extend a little longer through the crown of the head. And with every exhale, relax a little bit deeper. And with the heart protected, you're in a place to allow yourself to begin to heal. So begin to put it all back together again. There are 7 stages of grief, and it's not a linear process. We move in and out of those 7 stages of grief. Sometimes without warning. It's an unpredictable process. And on the next inhale, slowly begin to lift the chest. And we'll get that on the other side. So extend the right leg long, bend the left knee, bring the sole of the left foot to the inner right thigh. Feel free to move everything around if you need to, so you can connect the sit bones. And then on an inhale, lengthen the spine. As you exhale, begin to bow forward. Walk the hands out to your own degree. And forward folds, much like grief or a process. We don't want to rush them. It's not about speed. It's moving with your breath and following your body. So on an inhale, we always find length. And then as we exhale, we always fold in a little more. And while the same principles apply to the right leg extended as it did with the left leg extended, know that it can be a very different experience. Our bodies are not as symmetric as we'd like them to be. And as you're in your fold, if you notice that you need the support of your blocks, a blanket, feel free to give yourself whatever you need here. Still moving with the breath. And on the next inhale, slowly roll your way up. We're going to grab a block for the next posture. We're going to do something a little bit different than we normally would in this pose. Extend both legs straight in front of you for a seated forward bend. But bring the legs, the feet, about hips width apart, so there's some space there. And then you're going to bring a block in between the legs. Now, the block should probably be closer to the shins, but we're all a little bit different, so you may find that you need to move the block as you come into the posture. And you may even want 2 blocks. You may want to stack the blocks, or you can bring a blanket on top of the block if that feels good, which is what I think I'm going to do here. Take an inhale, find length. And then exhale, begin to fold forward and allow the head to rest on the blanket. If the hands seem to be near the feet and you want to grab onto the feet, feel free. But know that that is not required. With every inhale, we grow a little longer. And with every exhale, we fold in a little bit more. And as we're in this supported, seated forward bend, we have a lot of support for our head, for our overactive brains. In this posture, it does open up the legs, the backs of the legs, the whole back body. But with the block underneath the head, it also serves the purpose of taking some pressure off of all those muscles we use to keep our head lifted. And while we're grieving, while we're suffering, we're experiencing any sort of trauma, and we just want to fold in, it can actually be really hard just to keep the head lifted, keep the head up. I guess that's why it's a common phrase for people to tell people when they're down, keep your head up. And so in this posture, we give ourselves some much needed relief. Breathe into that space, across the back, in the back of the neck, the whole back body. And slowly on an inhale, begin to round the spine and roll your way up. And we're going to come to lie down on the back. Before we have our Shavasana, we're going to have a brief meditation. So if you would, please bring the blocks out to the side of the mat. There's an option to come into Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound angle. So you would bring the soles of the feet together and let the knees splay wide, resting on the blocks as you recline back onto the back. And if you'd like, you can take your blanket here and bring it right over your heart space, just like energetically protecting the heart. Let the hands fall where they may. Let the eyes close. And in an effort to stay present, maybe send your awareness to your breath. Noticing your inhales and your exhales. Let the body be heavy. Let everything relax. Notice if you're holding tension anywhere, even in the face, and let that tension go. Make any micro adjustments that you need to make to become comfortable. And then bring to mind the face of the person that you're grieving. Maybe you've lost a loved one, maybe even a pet. Maybe you're grieving the loss of a relationship. Whatever the case is, whatever your circumstances, see that face in your mind's eye. And take a few moments to notice what comes up. Notice what you're feeling. And then begin to have a conversation. Anything that was left unsaid, give yourself the space to say those things right now. Have a conversation about forgiveness, forgiving anything that you need to forgive, and receiving any forgiveness that you need. And as you talk about forgiveness, and you receive the forgiveness of your loved one, allow yourself to be filled with compassion as you focus on giving and receiving in this moment. Giving compassion, forgiveness, receiving compassion and forgiveness. And then allow yourself to remember your favorite memories, the joy that you felt. Relive those moments right now with your loved one. And allow yourself to be filled with joy, with love, knowing that the joy and the love and the memories will live on. And then allow this meditation to come to a close. Deepen your breath. Slowly begin to bring the hands to the sides of the thighs or the knees. And use the hands to bring the knees together. Maybe kick the blocks out of the way. Windshield wiper your knees back and forth. And then give yourself whatever you need here. Maybe you need a hug. You can hug the knees into the chest. Maybe you like to close practice in a reclined twist. Or take a happy baby. And then we'll all find Shavasana, final resting pose. Begin to deepen the breath. On an inhale, maybe stretch the body long. And as you're ready, slowly remove the blanket from the heart and set it to the side. We're going to roll over onto the side, and eventually we press our way up into a comfortable seated position. Take your time getting here. Thank you for sharing your practice with me today. Winnie the Pooh said, "If ever the day comes that we can't be together, please keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever." Namaste.